the summer of 2003, the quiet streets of two American states, Florida and Tennessee, became hunting grounds for a man with no mercy in his heart. His name was Henry Lee Jones, and wherever he went, death seemed to follow. It began with Carlos Perez in Florida, a man who thought he was helping a worker in need, only to be betrayed in the most brutal way. Bound, beaten, and strangled in his own home, Perez's final moments were spent in sheer terror, and his killer walked away without a trace. But Jones wasn't finished. Weeks later in Bartlett, Tennessee, Clarence and Lillian James welcomed the wrong man into their lives. What followed was a scene so horrific that even veteran detectives struggled to describe it. The couple tied up, tortured, and strangled to death. The method was the same. The cruelty, identical. At first, no one connected the murders. Two states, two crime scenes, hundreds of miles apart. But the killer had made a mistake. One drop of DNA, one witness willing to speak, and the puzzle began to take shape. Investigators soon realized they were chasing a predator who killed for control, for power, and perhaps for pleasure. By the time police caught up to Henry Lee Jones, the bodies were already in the ground, and the damage was irreversible. What they uncovered was not just a killer, but a man who moved like a shadow, striking fast, vanishing, and leaving only fear behind. This is the story of Henry Lee Jones, the drifter who turned kindness into a death sentence and whose name would be forever linked to some of the most chilling murders of the early 2000s, a.k.a. BAM classification murderer characteristics, robberies, number of victims. 4 date of murders, August 22-27, 2003 date of arrest, September 2003 date of birth. August 23, 1963 victims profile, Clarence James, 82, and Lillian James, 67, Carlos Perez, 19. Method of murder, stabbing with knife, location, Tennessee, Florida, USA. Status, sentenced to death in Tennessee on May 14, 2009. Sentenced to death in Florida on May 6, 2014, Henry Lee Jones was sentenced to death in Shelby County, Tennessee in 2009. He was charged with killing a Shelby County couple during a robbery at their home. In 2000, Jones was sentenced to death in Florida for the murder of Carlos Perez, 19. May 6, 2002. May God have mercy on your soul. Those heavy words were among the last in a court order, sentencing Henry Lee Jones to death following his conviction for the 2003 murder of Carlos Perez in a seedy motel room. Perez was found dead at the Super 8 Motel on US 1, near downtown Melbourne. Jones was already facing 2 death sentences for a double homicide in Tennessee. Judge John M. Griesbaum sentenced Jones on Friday. In his order, he described how the Brevard County medical examiner Sajid Kaiser determined Perez had been strangled. Pressure was applied and released repeatedly. The order said Kaiser called this sexual asphyxia a kind of sadism to enhance sexual pleasure. Similarly, Perez was cut multiple times, progressively more deeply. The medical examiner felt this was a sadistic act. Jones denied killing Perez in court. In a letter to Florida Today, he said he was framed, and he described harsh conditions in jail under suicide watch. Prosecutors said they consider Jones a serial killer based on the Florida Supreme Court definition, somebody who has killed 3 or more people. Perez's father wiped tears from his eyes in court the day Jones was found guilty in October. People say time heals, William Perez told Florida Today at the time of the verdict. It doesn't. I miss him as much today as when he went missing. October 8, 2013. A man on Tennessee's death row for killing an elderly Bartlett couple in 2003 was convicted Tuesday in Florida of killing a 19-year-old man in a motel. There, several days later in a similar fashion. Henry Lee Jones represented himself in the capital murder trial in Titusville, Fla, where a Brevard County jury convicted him in the murder of Carlos Perez on August 27, 2003 in Melbourne. On Wednesday, after 28 minutes of deliberation, the jury sentenced Jones to death. In 2009, Jones, 50, was convicted in Shelby County of the brutal slayings of Clarence and Lillian James, who were found stabbed, bound, and strangled in August of 2003 in their home in the 2400 block of Bartlett Boulevard. The Tennessee jury gave Jones 2 death sentences after the trial, in which they learned that Jones also was the prime suspect in the murder of Perez, who also was stabbed, bound, and strangled. Prosecutor Thomas Henderson called the Perez murder a signature crime that established Jones' identity in the Bartlett case. Jones, who once lived near Bartlett, was arrested 3 weeks later in his hometown of Fort Lauderdale. In April, the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals upheld Jones' convictions and death sentences. The Florida jury heard testimony about the Bartlett TN killings, as well as another similar stabbing and strangulation, the 2002 death of Keith Gross, 24, of Fort Lauderdale. Jones remains the prime suspect in that case, though he has never been indicted. Thursday, May 14, 2009. After getting to know Henry Lee Jones over the past 2 weeks, a jury took less than 3 hours Thursday to find him to be among the worst of the worst. The criminal court jury sentenced the Florida man to death by lethal injection for the 2003 murders of Clarence James, 82, and Lillian James, 67, who were bound and strangled with their throats slashed in their Bartlett home. For Jones 45, the end here may be only the beginning in his home state, where he is the prime suspect in at least 2 similar killings. He certainly has done enough to earn the death penalty, said State Prosecutor Thomas Henderson, who nevertheless said the sentence means little. As I told the victims' families, this is not going to change anything. He's still alive and their loved one is still dead. Jones becomes the 35th Shelby County convicted inmate on Tennessee's death row and 88th total. Judge John Colton Jr. set no execution date because automatic appeals will take years, beginning with a defense motion for a new trial set for June 11th. I've got to get on with my life now, said Margaret Coleman, whose mother and stepfather were the victims in the Bartlett case. My mama will be in my thoughts. Now she can rest in peace. Jones, who had once lived in the Bartlett area for about 5 months, told jurors he came back to visit relatives in August of 2003 before returning to Florida after a few days. He sparred with prosecutors during the sentencing phase of his trial Wednesday, angrily denying any involvement in the murders of the elderly couple. Prosecutors told jurors they got to see the same frightening man that Jameses encountered. His co-defendant, Perez Young, testified that he watched as Jones robbed and then brutally murdered Lillian James. He said he also saw the body of Clarence James in a utility room in their home on Bartlett Boulevard. Young, 27, who faces lesser charges, quoted Jones as saying, "You know what time it is, old lady," before killing her. Young said he asked Jones why he killed her, and Jones replied, "Because she's seen my face." Prosecutors Henderson and John Campbell were allowed to tell jurors of the killing of 19-year-old Carlos Perez 4 days later in Melbourne, Florida, because it was a unique signature crime of Jones's that helped establish his identity in the Bartlett case. Stolen credit card purchases and other evidence also placed him in the Melbourne area at the time. Like the Jameses, Perez was bound, strangled, and slashed multiple times across the neck. The bindings were removed, the crime scene was cleaned. He was left face down and he was robbed, just as in the Bartlett case, prosecutors said. One tearful juror was later seen hugging Perez's father, William Perez of Fort Lauderdale, who testified earlier in the trial. Jones also is the prime suspect in the 2002 killing of Keith Gross, 24, of Fort Lauderdale, whose parents, Philip and Marjorie Gross of Long Island, NY, met privately with jurors who learned of their son's killing only after Thursday's sentencing. Both families said they now will push for Florida authorities to prosecute Jones there. "I'm going to tell Florida you have a free shot," said Philip Gross. Jones' brother Eddie Jones, also of Fort Lauderdale, said he did not know what role, if any, his brother played in the Bartlett murders. He testified on his brother's behalf in the sentencing trial because he said no one else in the family wanted to participate. Wednesday, May 13, 2009. Convicted double murderer Henry Lee Jones told jurors Wednesday that he casually knew the Bartlett couple he was convicted of killing but insisted he never harmed them. And he blamed the guilty verdict on prosecutors, his co-defendant, and even his own lawyers. Jones also told the criminal court jurors who will decide today on a sentence of life or death that he ain't no hater and has no hard feelings toward them for their guilty verdict. "I ain't mad at y'all," Jones said, holding his hands out toward the 8 women and 4 men in the jury box. "I still love y'all. Y'all just ain't heard the whole story." On Tuesday, jurors convicted Jones of first-degree felony murder in the strangulation and stabbing deaths of Clarence James, 82, and his wife Lillian James, 67, who were found dead in their Bartlett home on August 23, 2003, Jones' 40th birthday. Despite the pleadings of his defense attorneys, Jones, 45, took the stand and talked for more than an hour during the penalty phase of his 9-day capital murder trial. He cried over his childhood. He sparred with prosecutors, and he second-guessed his attorneys for advising him not to testify earlier during the guilt or innocence phase of the trial. Defense attorneys later told jurors that they had seen a broken man who deserved mercy. Prosecutors told jurors they had had the rare opportunity to see a controlling, heartless killer who still enjoys seeing the crime scene pictures of his victims. "I never murdered nobody," Jones said emphatically, swiveling back and forth in the witness chair. "Them people are lying. They only paint a picture of me as an animal on the street. That's not true." Jones, one of 14 children who grew up without a father in Cleveland, Miss, sobbed when he talked of older relatives who, he said, beat him with belts, cords, hangers, and water hoses. After moving to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, he went to prison at age 18 for robbery and kidnapping, serving 16 years. Jones lived in the Bartlett area for about 5 months, not far from the James residence, and said he drove back from Florida in 2003 to visit relatives and to pick up old mail. Traveling with him was co-defendant Perez Young, 27, also of Florida, who testified in the trial that he watched as Jones robbed and killed Lillian James in her home on Bartlett Boulevard. Young said when he asked Jones why he killed her, Jones replied, "She's seen my face." Young said he also saw the body of Clarence James in a rear utility room and that Jones threatened to kill him as well if he ever told anyone what he had seen. Young faces lesser charges in the case, which will be handled later. Prosecutors are seeking the death penalty because Jones has 5 prior violent felony convictions. The murders were heinous, atrocious, and cruel. The murders were committed to eliminate witnesses, and the murders were committed during a robbery. Another factor is that Clarence James was over the age of 70. The retired Memphis City worker who had a pacemaker was 82. Jones is the prime suspect in two similar killings, the 2002 slaying of Keith Gross, 24 of Fort Lauderdale, and the slaying of Carlos Perez, 19 in Melbourne Flaw, just 4 days after the Jameses were killed in Bartlett. During the trial, jurors learned of the Perez killing, which, like the Bartlett murders, involved strangulation, throat-slashing bindings, and a crime scene cleanup by the perpetrator. Prosecutors called them signature crimes that established the identity of Jones as the killer of the Jameses. Sunday, December 7, 2008. Crimes of youths. August 4, 1981 at 18, Jones is wanted. Fort Lauderdale Flay police officers Wayne Swenson and Pat Woosley meet with 17-year-old Annie Mae Robbins. The night before, Robbins tells the officers she and her boyfriend, 18-year-old Henry Lee Bam Jones, were fighting inside an apartment in Fort Lauderdale. Jones had chased her off with a gun, forcing her to leave her baby behind. She called police several times that evening, Robbins says, but every time they arrived, Jones would flee. The baby is still inside the apartment. She advised us that Jones was violent, Woosley recalls in court testimony. Jones has a warrant for his arrest, Swenson and Woosley discover, and the two officers arrive at the apartment about 8 a.m. A man let Swenson in and advised that he was the brother of Jones and said that Jones wasn't there. Woosley recalls. Swenson asked if it was okay if he could look around, and the brother said fine. Swenson walks through the kitchen and into a hallway that leads to the bathroom and then the bedroom. A young woman is inside the bedroom and two infants lay on the living room floor. Inside the bathroom, Swenson sees a shirtless man standing behind the shower curtain. His 145-pound frame stands about 5 feet 10 inches tall. I had him come out from behind the shower curtain, Swenson recalls. As Woosley stands back, Swenson searches Jones for weapons. Suddenly, Jones goes berserk, kicking and punching the two officers as he runs for the door. Code 3, Woosley radios requesting backup. Code 3, Jones knocks Swenson to the ground and barrels over Woosley. But he isn't strong enough to break free. From the ground, Swenson grabs Jones and drags him down. The two men wrestle on the living room floor, kicking and punching as the two infants lay next to them. The brawling men stand still, struggling against each other, and stumble over 3 chairs until finally crashing on top of the kitchen table. It breaks beneath them, sending both men to the floor once again. The woman who was in the bedroom runs from the apartment as the yelling and fighting escalate. Swenson and Jones continue to struggle against each other as Woosley tries to separate them. She bites down on Jones' hand. He won't relent. Backup isn't coming, she thinks, and the fight is lasting too long. It seemed like hours, Woosley remembers. Finally, 3 additional Fort Lauderdale police officers rush in and pull Jones from Swenson. It takes all 5 officers to subdue the 18-year-old. Jones is arrested and charged with 2 counts of battery on a law enforcement officer. He is released on bail. September 30, 1981, Jones burglarizes home. Fort Lauderdale police arrest Henry Lee Jones for burglarizing a home. Witnesses saw Jones and another man running from the back of the house as the owner returned. He is again released on bail. October 3, 1981, the voice from the trunk. Just after 9 a.m., Henry Lee Jones and a male friend, 19-year-old Jackie Johnson, begin to look at vehicles at Johnny Harris Pontiac, a used car lot on US 1 in Fort Lauderdale. Joseph Giovanni, a 45-year-old salesman, meets the pair. Jones shows Giovanni $600 in cash and says they are interested in a used car. He claimed his wife had a car financed with the bank, and they seemed like buyers to me, Giovanni recalls in court testimony. Jones and Johnson liked the cream-colored 1976 Pontiac Grand Prix. They wanted to go on a test drive, Giovanni remembers, and the salesman goes to the office to grab the keys and a dealer license plate. Joel Kay, a fellow salesman watching from the office, is concerned. "You're not going to take a ride, are you?" he asks Giovanni. "Yes, they showed me money," he replies. "Boy, you better be careful." Jones gets behind the wheel while Giovanni takes the front passenger seat. Johnson sits in the back. At first, the test drive proceeds as most do, a nice drive through a residential area near the car lot. Then Jones begins to act peculiarly. "What do you think?" he asks Johnson in the back. He keeps repeating the question. "What do you think?" Jones presses his right foot hard down on the accelerator. Giovanni, realizing he is in trouble, turns to the passenger in the back seat. "All I saw was the barrel," Giovanni remembers. "It was a black barrel." Johnson trains the gun on the salesman from the back seat. "Keep it cool, mother expletive," Jones says. "Keep it cool." Jones continues to drive for 10 minutes before finally pulling into a vacant area with overgrown foliage. Bullshit. He orders Giovanni out of the vehicle. With Johnson holding the gun, Jones bends the car salesman over the car. He pats the man down and pulls out Giovanni's wallet, taking $40 in cash and several credit cards. Jones opens the trunk and orders Giovanni inside. "It felt like 200 degrees in there," Giovanni remembers. He can barely breathe. "I got the tool out that holds down the tire and pried the lid open about half an inch or so to get some air in the trunk." The car stops several times while Giovanni is in the trunk. One of the stops is the apartment of 17-year-old Annie Mae Robbins, the girlfriend. Jones chased away with a gun in August of that year. She is asleep when the Grand Prix pulls up about 10 a.m. "Let's go," Jones tells her. They are headed, Jones says, to Palatka in Central Florida. As they drive north, Jones and Johnson are in the front seats. Robbins is in the back. From there, she can hear a voice. "Hey, you guys," she hears according to her trial testimony. "Let me out." Robbins asks Jones if someone is in the trunk. The two men in the front seat laugh. A short time later, Jones pulls the car into an orange grove in Lake Worth near West Palm Beach. He and Johnson open the trunk and order out Giovanni. The car salesman walks 23 paces before being shoved beneath a tree. "I thought I was going to be killed," Giovanni says. Jones and Johnson run to the Grand Prix where Robbins is still seated in back. "What did he say?" Robbins asks Jones. He turns to repeat the last words he heard from Giovanni. "Oh my God." The trio then continue north on US 441. October 4, 1981, don't ask me no questions. Florida State Trooper J.H. Cooper clocks the Tan Grand Prix at 75 miles per hour. It is 7:05 a.m., and the lawman is on State Road 200 just north of Jacksonville Flay. I gave pursuit and stopped the vehicle approximately 1 mile north of the area where I had clocked it. Cooper recalls in court testimony in Fort Lauderdale. Inside the Grand Prix, Henry Lee Jones wakes his girlfriend, Anna Mae Robbins, who is asleep in the back seat. "I just got pulled over by the police," he tells her. The 18-year-old from Fort Lauderdale stops the car on the side of the road. Cooper pulls in behind the Grand Prix with his cruiser's light ablaze and walks to Jones' driver's side window. He asks the driver for his license. Robbins asks her boyfriend what he's going to do. "He can't stay there," Jones tells her. "I'll go to jail," he says. He cranked the car up and pulled off. Robbins remembers leaving the state trooper on the side of the road. Cooper runs back to his car and follows Jones's Grand Prix. They reach 110 miles per hour until Jones pulls off onto a dirt road that leads to a pulpwood yard. The Grand Prix continues at speeds of 90 to 65 miles per hour. The state trooper then begins to slow down. Cooper knows the road. He knows it is about to end. But Jones doesn't. The Grand Prix hits a series of railroad tracks, including a main line at full speed before coming to a halt. The engine is still running, Robbins would recall, but the car won't move. I'm scared she just... She tells Jones. "You don't have nothing to be scared of," he replies. Jones takes the handgun from beneath the seat, and he and Robbins run into the brush. "They run for 5 hours, Robbins says. Jones climbs atop a boxcar to see where they are. A helicopter, police, and dogs then begin to surround them. They continue to run nearing Interstate 95. Cooper stops Robbins and arrests her. Jones continues toward the interstate, hopping one fence before finally being tackled by troopers near an embankment. "Did you know that the car you were riding in was stolen?" Cooper asks Robbins. "I asked Henry where he got the car," Robbins answers, and Henry said, "Don't ask me no questions." Jones is charged in Broward County, FLA, with robbery, kidnapping, grand theft, possession of a firearm while engaged in a felony and carrying a concealed firearm. February 13, 1982, Jones among 5 men who beats an inmate. While in jail, Henry Lee Jones is among 5 men who severely beat another inmate, Santiago Yayo Valena, leaving the man with multiple wounds, an eye injury, and a broken jaw. Jones, however, is not charged criminally for the assault. March 11, 1982, a brief escape. Henry Lee Jones escapes while being escorted from the Fort Lauderdale jail to a hearing in courtroom 354 in the Broward County Courthouse. He is recaptured within hours. March 29, 1982, guilty of battery on a law enforcement officer. Henry Lee Jones is found guilty on 2 counts of battery on a law enforcement officer for the August 4, 1981 fight with Fort Lauderdale police officers Wayne Swenson and Pat Woosley. He is sentenced to 1 year and a day in prison. September 2, 1982, guilty of robbery and kidnapping. Henry Lee Jones is found guilty of robbery and kidnapping for the October 1981 incident and receives 2 30-year prison sentences to run concurrently. In addition, Jones pleads guilty to his attempted jail escape and receives an additional 5-year prison term, bringing his total sentence to 35 years and putting his official release date at the year 2000. October 13, 1982, Jones becomes inmate 5985 Mikey. Henry Lee Jones becomes an inmate of the Florida Department of Corrections. He first goes to Baker Correctional Institute in North Florida before being transferred in and out of more than a dozen other correctional facilities. In fact, Jones is hardly a model prisoner. While in prison, he is cited for 36 violations, including 11 charges of assault or fighting, and a charge of inciting riots while at Liberty Correctional Institute in Bristol, Flay. His official sentence is lengthened by 2 years and 9 months for the violations. A free man, July 1, 1990, early release. Despite having a 35-year prison sentence, Henry Lee Jones is released from the Florida Department of Corrections after serving less than 15 years. In the late 1990s, Florida's overcrowded prison system gave early release to thousands of inmates, including those who committed violent crimes and continued to be violent while incarcerated. Jones is 33 years old. June 16, 1999, probation for stalking. The Jacksonville Flay. Sheriff's Office charges Henry Lee Jones with stalking, and after pleading guilty, he receives 12 months of probation. May 31, 2000, the failed robbery plot. Flagler County, Flay. Sheriff's Deputy James E. Burrows watches as a green 1998 Chevy pulls into Palm Coast Auto Body at 11:58 p.m. and cuts its lights. Curious Burroughs drives into the closed body shop and sees two men inside the Chevy. They are Henry Lee Jones and Kenneth Leslie, a Jacksonville man 16 years Jones Jr., and they say they are on their way to Orlando. When Burroughs asks Jones why they pulled over, Jones says he is having car trouble. A light had appeared on the dashboard, he says. But the deputy is unconvinced. If they were having car trouble on their way to Orlando, he asks them, why didn't they stop at a gas station near the interstate? Burroughs then questions Leslie alone. He confesses the two men had planned to go across the street to the school and break into vending machines. He was just along for the ride, Leslie says. Inside the car, Burroughs finds two pairs of brown gloves, and Leslie confirms they were going to wear the gloves during the robbery. Burroughs arrests both men, and upon searching Jones' car, the deputy finds a tin containing marijuana and rolling papers. Jones is charged with loitering and possession of marijuana and drug paraphernalia. After he spends 2 days in jail, prosecutors drop the charges. Aug 29, 2000, battery charges dropped. The Jacksonville Flay. Sheriff's Office arrests Henry Lee Jones again, this time for battery, though the charges are quickly dropped. March 21, 2000, was sent to 2 days in jail. Henry Lee Jones violates a restraining order in Jacksonville Flay and is ordered to spend 72 days in county jail. Oct. 10, 2001, he sees the car swerve. Near downtown Fort Lauderdale, Fly. At 2 a.m., Sergeant Bill Johnston sees a gray 1988 Ford Fiesta swerving from lane to lane on busy Broward Boulevard. He begins to follow the car. He can make out the driver, who has thrown a punch at the person in the passenger seat, causing the car to swerve. Johnston then pulls up alongside the Fiesta. He sees the driver punch the passenger again. The car then moves to the right, toward the entrance to Interstate 95, and the police officer turns on his blue lights to stop the vehicle. As soon as he does, the Fiesta swerves again and comes to an abrupt stop near the guardrail. The driver jumps out of the car and runs. The passenger, bleeding and screaming, steps out as well. The injured woman in the passenger seat was Brandy Collins. The driver was her boyfriend, Henry Lee Jones, and he is now running east on Broward Boulevard. Johnston radios in the Fiesta's license plate, and Sergeant Dave Wheeler answers the call. He runs the plate number in his cruiser's computer. The Fiesta had been reported stolen in Daytona Beach, Wheeler tells Johnston. Wheeler soon arrives at the spot where Jones fled, and the sergeant and his K-9 Axel begin to follow the man's trail. He seems to have gone behind the large Salvation Army compound on Broward Boulevard and hopped over 2 fences to get inside. After cutting the compound's lock with bolt cutters, Wheeler enters with Axel. The dog leads them to a white 4-door Chrysler New Yorker. Jones is inside, lying on the floorboards of the rear seat. Wheeler tells Jones he is under arrest and orders him out of the car. Jones stays put. I stated I would break the window and send in the dog, but Mr. Jones still refused, Wheeler writes in his report. After being ordered several times to get out of the car, Jones appears to be ready to open the door, but then he stops and makes a gesture that suggests he won't leave. Wheeler smashes the glass window and sends Axel into the car. The K-9 takes hold of Jones's left arm, and he finally opens the door and exits the vehicle, Axel still attached to his limb. Police charge Jones with battery, domestic violence, resisting arrest without violence, grand theft, and burglary. But Jones escapes serious punishment. The Broward State Attorney's Office drops the most serious charges against Jones because prosecutors believe they could not prove he knew the car was stolen. Although a man named Jack Gilmore watched as the car was stolen from Automotive Drive in Daytona Beach, he could not identify the car thieves beyond his description that they were black men. Instead, the Broward State Attorney's Office proceeds with misdemeanor charges for battery and resisting arrest. Jones pleads guilty to both charges and spends 126 days in jail. Jan 10, 2002. I need to know. While in jail, Jones writes a series of letters to Brandy Collins, the woman he was beating in the car, on Oct. 10, 2001. Collins, who is pregnant with Jones's child, has not been visiting or writing frequently. According to the letters, she also told authorities Jones was threatening her from jail. When Collins hadn't visited or written, Jones sent a letter to his niece asking her to inform him whether Collins was smoking or drinking and whether she was going to the doctor. I need to know how is she treat sicky my baby, Jones writes. I am very concerned sick about that. May 14, 2002, Jones accused of raping boy. A woman claiming to be Henry Lee Jones' friend files a complaint with the Fort Lauderdale Flight Police Department. According to the complaint, Jones and her mentally handicapped teenage son were spending time together at an apartment complex. They both started drinking together and rode bicycles and walked around, the police report states. Jones and the boy each took a Percodan, a narcotic painkiller, and Jones then led the boy to an abandoned apartment building where he said his girlfriend lives. There they drank brandy. The Percodan and alcohol hit the victim hard, and he was almost completely incapacitated, the police report states. According to the boy's statement, Jones wanted to have sex. The boy objected, saying he was not with this. He tried to leave, and when he did, Jones choked him. They began to have sex, and when the boy tried to leave again, Jones choked him more. Finally, the boy told Jones he would allow him to finish having sex if he relented choking. In all, the boy said the alleged rape lasted 3 hours. June 25, 2002, rape charge dropped. As it did in October 2001, the Broward State Attorney's Office goes easy on Jones. Prosecutors decline charges related to the alleged rape of the mentally handicapped teenager. In a memorandum, Aston State Attorney Lauren Kovitz says she would have difficulty proving rape charges, that the sex was not consensual since the boy spent the day with Jones and went willingly to the abandoned apartment. What's more, Kovitz does not think she can prove sexual battery on a mentally handicapped person since the boy, despite his mental incapacities, understood what sex was. For a case to be charged as a sexual battery upon someone that is mentally handicapped, we would have to prove that this person did not even understand the concept of sex, Kovitz writes. In this case, we would not be able to do this, as the victim has had sex before and understood what it meant to have sex with someone of the same gender as him. The killing begins. September 9, 2002, he said his name was Bam. Ken Walker arrives at Kitchens to Go, his custom kitchens showroom in Fort Lauderdale, Fla. Monday morning, as he always does. But something is different this time. His employee and friend, 24-year-old Keith Gross, hasn't arrived yet. The day before, Gross wasn't at Walker's house to watch the Miami Dolphins game as he expected. Now that Gross is late to work, Walker grows anxious. He calls his friend. No answer. Several more hours pass, and by noon, Gross still hasn't shown for work. I'm going over to Keith's, Walker tells his other employees. Gross lives just a few blocks away from the store. As Walker goes up to the small house, he hears the living room air conditioner running. The sound is immediately odd to Walker since Gross had told him he was having trouble paying the utility bill and was trying not to use the air conditioner. Walker knocks on the door. No one answers. The air conditioner continues to drone. Walker then strolls around to the back of the house near the bedroom where another window unit air conditioner is humming. Concerned, he pushes his face to the bedroom window, and through a small opening in the mini blinds, Walker sees his friend. Gross is on the floor naked and hogtied. A sheet covers his neck and head. His hands pulled up behind his back are black, strangled for blood by the tight bindings around the wrists. I was a sergeant in the Marine Corps. I've seen a lot of things in life, Walker would recall during an October interview. But it's embedded in my head. Walker, having left his cell phone at the store, rushes back to Kitchens to Go. There's something wrong with Keith, he tells his other employees. Call the police. There's something wrong with Keith? Walker and Gross's brother Michael tell Fort Lauderdale police no one should have had reason to kill the amicable 24-year-old. But they both had suspicions about one person, they tell investigators. Gross had been spending time with a man with a teardrop tattooed below his left eye, they said. He said his name was Bam, Michael Gross recalls. Walker met Bam in July, 2 months before the murder. Keith came over to Walker's Fort Lauderdale home to borrow $20. He brought with him a new friend. Bam had dreadlocks, gold teeth, and that teardrop tattoo. Walker immediately didn't like him. Don't ever bring that guy to my house again, he told Gross. Is it a black thing? Gross replied. You're black too, you know. But Gross obeyed the request and Walker never saw Bam again. He tells police. Fort Lauderdale Police State. Mark Shotwell identifies Bam as Henry Lee Jones. In fact, Shotwell questions Jones following Gross' murder, but despite the man's long criminal history, the detective does not focus on Jones as a likely suspect. A possible reason Shotwell firmly believed the killer was gay, and by outside appearances, Jones was heterosexual. He had a girlfriend and a baby. It's unclear whether Shotwell, who declined to comment for this story, was aware of the May 2002 rape allegation against Jones. The investigative file is still under seal. Whether the detective realized Jones was bisexual, Shotwell was so convinced the killer was someone active in Broward County's large homosexual community that he made a public plea for information. We are looking for leads and asking the gay community to help if they have any information. Shotwell commented to The Express, a weekly gay newspaper in South Florida. All the while, Shotwell centered his inquiry on Walker, the boss and friend who found Gross's body. Shotwell examined computer files and email at Kitchens to Go and interrogated Walker several times about his relationship with Gross. Walker, angered that he was a suspect in his friend's murder, kept pushing the detective toward the man known as Bam. About that guy Bam, what did you find out? Walker remembered asking Shotwell. That was Keith's friend, Shotwell told him. Shotwell cleared Jones. Months passed. It was nearly a year before Jones allegedly killed again. Later, after 3 more deaths and Jones' eventual arrest for murder, Fort Lauderdale police linked Jones to Gross murder. His footprint matched bloody toe prints found at the house. Despite now being the only suspect, Jones has been not charged with Gross murder. August 22, 2003, 2 dead in Bartlett. Teverus Young wakes up to the knocking. He'd been asleep in Henry Lee Jones' beige Dodge Aries, and now a Burger King employee is at the window. The man is looking for Bam. Young is in Shelby County now, having driven from Florida with Jones for a day and a half. He'd only met Jones a few days before at Holiday Park in Fort Lauderdale, Fla. Young, who goes by the nickname T-Rex, is homeless and wanted by police for a February 2003 incident, in which he allegedly tried to firebomb his girlfriend's house. Jones offered Young money for sex when they were at the park in Florida, and the 20-year-old got in the car. They first went to eat at McDonald's, and Young stayed with Jones for several hours as he ran errands, stopping by pawn shops, and then at the Miami-Dade County Courthouse where Jones paid tickets. Afterwards, Jones drove to a warehouse where Young performed oral sex on him. That's when the trip to Tennessee began. Jones told Young he knew two women in Daytona Beach. They drove up and stayed with them for a night, and then continued north toward Memphis where Jones said he had relatives. In Memphis, following the knocking at the car window, Young finds Jones inside the Burger King. He's eating breakfast. They soon leave, and Jones parks the car in an apartment complex in Bartlett. Jones exits the car and crosses Bartlett Boulevard, heading to a house with the garage door up. An old man is inside the garage. Young follows Jones. "Hey, Pops, how you doing?" Young remembers Jones asking the man. "Doing fine," answers. Clarence James, an 82-year-old World War II veteran who retired from the Memphis Park Commission. James tells Young he was waiting for someone to cut his grass. Seeing the lawnmower in the front yard, Young offers to do the work instead. James says no and asks the 20-year-old to put the lawnmower in the backyard. Young does so, and when he returns to the front of the house, the garage door is down. He goes to the front door and enters the house. As he does, Jones walks past with a rope and a towel in his hands. Young then sees Jones throw 4-year-old Lillian Clarence James' wife to the ground. She screams. "Old lady, do you know what time it is?" Young hears Jones say. "Do you know what time it is? Where's your money? Where's your purse?" Young watches as Jones wraps a rope around Lillian's neck and chokes her. He then pulls out a knife and cuts open her throat. Jones hands Young a paper bag and orders him to follow. They go to the laundry room near the garage where Clarence James is lying in a pool of blood. His throat is slashed. Jones unties rope bindings from Clarence's arms and legs and places the ropes in the bag. He and Jones then take the elderly couple's valuables and leave. In the car, Jones shows Young the knife. "I swear if you tell somebody I'm going to kill you and cut your dick off," Jones says. Later that afternoon, Jones and Young arrive at Auto Corral, a car dealership in Batesville, Miss. Jones tells Michael Smith, the car lot's co-owner, that he'd come up from Florida and is interested in a vehicle. He pays cash for a white 1993 Lincoln Town Car and drives off the lot at 6:30 p.m. Jones is behind the wheel of the town car while Young drives the Dodge Aries. August 25, 2003, his accomplice is desperate. Tavares Young wants to get away from Henry Lee Jones. They are driving the two cars south on Interstate 95 along the east coast of Florida. Young is thinking about crashing the car, he would later say during a court hearing, but he's afraid he'll hurt someone. He starts racing Jones on the interstate, weaving in and out of traffic until he notices a police vehicle up ahead. Young steps on the accelerator and drives the Dodge Aries right up to the bumper of the police cruiser. Brevard County Sheriff's Det. Carlos Reyes immediately notices the Aries close behind him. He flashes on his blue lights as a warning, and Young backs off. Soon, Young speeds past the police car, and Reyes makes the decision to pull him over. Young has in his pocket rings stolen from the murdered couple in Bartlett, and as he pulls to side of Interstate 95, he put the rings on his fingers. Young is fidgety and nervous during the traffic stop, Reyes would recall later, and a few minutes after the stop, a white Lincoln Town Car pulls in behind the police cruiser. It's Henry Lee Jones. He tells the detective he'd just purchased the town car and was paying Young to drive the Dodge back to Fort Lauderdale. He has all the proper documentation. Reyes checks the backgrounds of both men and discovers an arrest warrant for Young in Broward County for the charge of trying to firebomb his girlfriend's house. Reyes arrests Young and tells Jones he can come back in 25 minutes to reclaim the Dodge Aries. But Jones doesn't return for the car. August 26, 2003. A new victim. Carlos Perez is a 19-year-old day laborer who lives in Wilton Manors, Fla, outside Fort Lauderdale. He leaves early in the morning to look for work at Dependable Temps. It's unclear what happens later that morning, but in the afternoon, Perez and another man come to the Super 8 motel in Melbourne, Fla. About 5 miles from where Young left the Dodge Aries the day before and near a gas station where a credit card belonging to Clarence and Lillian James was used. They drive up in Jones' white Lincoln Town Car. Perez checks into room 217. August 27, 2003, a body on the bed. The housekeepers at the Super 8 motel tell owner Ravindra Patel what they'd seen in room 217. Patel goes to the room, opens the door, and sees blood covering the bed and a body wrapped in a comforter. It is Carlos Perez, the 19-year-old from Wilton Manors, Fla. He suffered from strangulation, cuts to the neck, and a severed windpipe. What went on inside room 217 isn't clear. According to footwear impressions on the bathroom floor, there were at least 4 people in the room the day of Perez's murder. 5 cigarette butts were left in the room, and several of those matched Perez's DNA. But the DNA on one of the cigarette butts was a woman's, and that matched DNA found on Perez's penis, suggesting the 19-year-old and the unknown woman had sex at some point. Perez also had abrasions to his anus and bite marks on his back. Marks to his wrists and ankles suggested Perez was bound possibly with tape. August 28, 2003, police find Jones' car. Detectives from Melbourne, Fla, travel 150 miles south to Fort Lauderdale in an attempt to determine how Perez ended up in a bloody bed at the Super 8. They learned Perez had gone to Dependable Temps to find work the morning of August 26, 2003. Outside Dependable Temps date, Johnny Lawson of Melbourne notices the same type of car hotel staff saw pull up to the Super 8, a white Lincoln Town car. It has a customized Florida plate reading 69 BM. The plate, while not registered to the town car, belongs to a man named Henry Lee Jones of Benchumskas. He also works as a day laborer for the temp agency. August 30, 2003, Florida-Tennessee police compare evidence. Melbourne detectives discover police in Bartlett are inquiring about Jones's vehicle registration in Florida. They compare photographs of the crime scenes and realize the same person may be responsible for all three murders. Detectives' closest connection to Jones is Perez Young. He is still in jail in Broward County after being pulled over 5 days earlier in Brevard County. Upon questioning Young in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, detectives contact their counterparts in Tennessee. They secure a first-degree murder indictment against Jones for the killings of Clarence and Lillian James. September 17, 2003, fugitive hunter finds Jones. Following a brief car chase, Fort Lauderdale Fla Police State Chuck Morrow, a fugitive hunter, apprehends Jones on Sunrise Boulevard northwest of downtown. In the trunk of Jones' Lincoln Town car, police find a pair of Nike shoes. They match one of the footwear impressions made in the bathroom of the Super 8 in Melbourne. Both Jones and Young are extradited to Tennessee. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement, suspecting Jones could be responsible for murders throughout the Southeast, begins to work with other law enforcement agencies in examining unsolved cases involving the killer's alleged signature bindings and cuts to the neck. To date, however, Jones has been linked only to the murders of Keith Gross and Carlos Perez in Florida and Clarence and Lillian James in Tennessee. Investigators suspect Jones in other murders but have not specified those cases. On trial. June 24, 2005, the accomplice testifies. Perez Young testifies against Henry Lee Jones at a hearing in Shelby County Criminal Court. Judge John Colton Jr.'s courtroom, describing his car trip from Florida to Tennessee and the 2003 murders of Clarence and Lillian James. December 14, 2007, violence continues at 201 Poplar. Henry Lee Jones is accused of assaulting a cellmate while jailed at 201 Poplar and is moved to another cell. In a report, jailers with the Shelby County Sheriff's Office note the two inmates are enemies. August 29, 2008, evidence from Florida murder allowed. After hearing arguments, Shelby County Criminal Court Judge John Colton Jr. rules that prosecutors may enter evidence in Henry Lee Jones' Memphis trial of the Carlos Perez killing in Florida, even though Jones has not been charged with that murder. Colton declines, however, to allow in evidence from Keith Gross' murder, saying the killing was too remote in time to be relevant to the murder of the Jameses. A precedent exists in Tennessee for allowing evidence to be entered from a crime with which the defendant hasn't been charged. In 1950, the Tennessee Supreme Court ruled unanimously in Harris v. State that a woman was allowed to testify that she had been raped by L.J. Harris in Memphis 1 week before the man raped another woman, the crime for which he was charged. Sometimes to establish identity, it becomes relevant to show similarity of the plan or method by which more than one crime has been accomplished, the Supreme Court wrote in its ruling. November 13, 2008, trial delayed. Agreeing to give defense attorney Robert Perez more time to review evidence in the 2003 murder of Carlos Perez, Shelby County Criminal Court Judge John Colton Jr. moves Jones's trial date from December 1 to May 4, 2009.